She's got her, oh, I guess she can hear me. Okay, it's the second one. No, it is land. There we go. Is there any way to make that larger? Maybe most people can see. Oh, fabulous. Okay, I'd like the team to look at housing under multiple family residential, live work units, row houses, and apartments. And as Mr. Vunich mentioned, we did have recently a developer come in and want to build a fairly large complex of apartments with a couple of outbuildings that were used for other items and swimming pool and that sort of thing on a 4.31 acres, which is owned by the college. And this property is right behind the YMCA. And to the east is 109, directly to the east. Directly to the west is Generations Drive. And to the south is Turkey Track Road. And Turkey Track abuts several villas in the meadows of Wildwood. And I wanted to take a look at those three components under housing. The second one is single family attached and single family detached. And I had primarily was going to speak about multiple family residential, but I was wondering, and I will make a proposal on this, is that is now currently with a P, a green P, as you can see there. And it means permitted by right. And my hunch is, and I may be wrong and can be corrected, but a lot of times when I believe that developers come in, they see permitted by right. And I'm wondering if they don't think, aha, I might not have to jump through as many fired hoops, as opposed to uses requiring a conditional use permit, which is under number, the second one. And originally, it was also listed under single family detached because in 2017, there was another developer that wanted to put, I think 35 or 36 homes to the east of the meadows of Wildwood on 15.1 acres. And it had a C there. It had a conditional use permit. I don't know why that was taken away. Joe, can you explain that? Why it's missing now? Because in the other duplicate copies that I have, there is a C, a conditional use permit for the single family detached. And also on the Wildwood Town Center Development Manual, it has the C there as well.
Ms. Broyles, it could be simple as an oversight on the department when trying to address all the changes that we've recommended as a team to the land use activity chart. So what Kathy, Travis, and I will do is we'll kind of work back through the minutes and see if it was intended or not intended, and then we can update you what we found.
Thank you. I'm hoping it was an error. But I don't recall, and maybe the team recalls, but I don't recall voting on that at all. I am concerned that there were over 300 residents, and that was petitions, letters, emails, comment forms, who were adamantly opposed to the apartments, multiple family apartments on that piece of property and the traffic that it causes, and among other things. And those have already been spoken about in the recent past. And as some of you may or may not know, the developer did cease inquiring about that property and actually wrote something in August that they were going to remove themselves from interest on that property. So my point now is, if I could make a recommendation that we also change cultural institutional section there, omit the P and put a C there. Because I think that after living through a developer who came in 17, I think it's important that we have many checks and balances for allowing developers to come in, especially on small pieces of property. And that both of those were small pieces of property, in my opinion. And that one that was 10.1 acres was really, in my guess, was 8 to 10 acres that was actually usable. So my proposal is, I'd like to propose that we change the section that says multiple family residential live work row houses and apartments to a C, conditional use permit, as opposed to permitted by right.
Under the
Mr.
neighborhood general district column, is that correct?
Say again, please.
Under the neighborhood general district column?
Yeah, no, under cultural institutional.
Oh, under cultural institutions column.
The cultural institutional. It's to your far right.
Is there a second to that motion? Second, is that a second, Mitz?
It is.
Okay.
I also just get confirmation from Joe in the department that I have the previous or the original development manual, and it appears that single family detached should also be conditional use permitted. Do we understand that to be correct and it was an omission?
Chief Loyal, it sounds like it was an omission, but as I mentioned, we were going to go back and just verify through the meeting minutes that it was an omission on our part, not intended by the team. But I would offer as an option, with the motion made now by Ms. Broyles and seconded by Chief Loyal, maybe we should just make all of the housing components in cultural institutional C for conditional use. So even if it is an omission on our part, add it back in for single family detached as a C, single family detached as a C, and then multiple family as a C. Maybe all housing units should be considered in the cultural institutional, given the pattern that's been established now.
If Ms. Broyles would agree to that adjustment of her amendment, I would agree to second it.
I would certainly agree to that. And thank you for the clarification, as you stated, Joe. Thank you.
So there's a new motion made by Ms. Broyles and seconded by Chief Loyal that under the cultural institutional column under housing, all three types of housing would have a C as the entry. Is there, so we have a motion and a second. Are there comments, discussion of the motion? Deborah?
I say,
Lindsay. Deborah first and then Lindsay.
Joe, who owns that property?
Well, the community college owns the 5-acre parcel of ground that was part of the most recent ERC proposal from the developer from Arkansas. The 15-acre tract of land that's to the east of the meadows of Wildwood is owned by the Pruitt sisters. And for the most part, the remainder is owned by the community college.
Thank you.
Lindsay, you're next.
I may have misheard earlier, Kathy, but did you say there was a representative from the community college on the public comment tonight? And do they have an opinion on this?
There are two. Mr. Zink and Dr. Lupardis are both on the call. So whenever you all are ready for public comment, they can unmute and turn on their camera.
So I recognize each of whichever community college representative is first selected, giving them time to.
How far away are we on your phone?
And unmute.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chair and Ms. Arnett. I'm Paul Zink, and I'm the Vice Chancellor for Finance and Administration at the college. We also have Dr. Lupartis, who is the president of the Wildwood campus of St. Louis Community College. I don't think either one of us really understood what the item was this evening and was ready to speak on it. But I will say, you know, from the college's standpoint, we're concerned with any kind of restrictions on the land that we own, and particularly this parcel of land, which we had a contract on for sale. Following the meetings in August, that contract failed as the developer moved away. So, that quite obviously was disappointing to our leadership and trustees. However, with respect to what provisions you put on use of the land, the college certainly respects the city of Wildwood, and certainly this board's decision making as to what you think is best. We always support what you think is best for the city. We have removed the property from being listed for sale at this time. The college at this time does not have an intended future use for the property. So, I guess I would just say from a strictly business standpoint, the best thing for the college would be to as little as possible restrict future use of the land. But again, with respect to your deliberations, we certainly understand, what your purpose is tonight. And I'd be happy to answer any other questions you might have about our both ownership and use of the property.
Are there any questions for the community college representatives? Deborah? I'm sorry, Liz.
Yes, this is, I'm speaking to Mr. Zink. This is not such a protection or a liability in a sense to the community college. It's more taking a closer look as a conditional use permit. It's not expelling anyone from it. It's not keeping anyone from making an offer on the land. It's giving the city, and Joe, you can tell me if I'm speaking about this correctly. It gives the city more possibilities to take a look at these developers who want to come in and provide these three housing options. Is that
Yep.
correct? Is that correct, Joe?
And then I'll recognize Terry.
In context, yes. Excuse me. My apologies. I think the overarching message to representatives from the community colleges is that multiple family type of units could still be considered on any and all of the properties designated cultural institutional overlay district. There just is a second tier of review, more so than what was provided in the most recent instance you cited, Mr. Zink, relative to ERC.
Terry?
I'm really wondering whether single family detached belongs on cultural and institutional. I mean, I can see the attached because you've already got the Meadows of Manchester there, or of Wildwood. Of course, if the other sites were developed, they'd be complaining about developing Meadows of Wildwood. So whoever gets there first gets to say what everybody else gets to do.
Well, Mr. Hoffman, I hope that's not the case. We do have a plan and we're supposed to follow the plan. But I guess what I would say is originally the Meadows of Wildwood was intended to be attached units and not as many as one might think, with a large centralized facility for congregate care purposes. The recession changed the direction. The problem the city faced is that some of the attached units, as well as excuse me, some of the attached units had been built and occupied, and we had a group of residents in limbo. The best we could come up with was creating villas that are detached on individual lots. So there is that type of land use already in the cultural institutional overlay district. That's why I offered that maybe we should just make all housing in that particular overlay district conditional, because we have a development there that exhibits that characteristic, and certainly we could consider others then as a component of it.
Okay, I thought the Meadows of Wildwood was all attached.
No, quite frankly, there's a small percentage relative to the detached that are attached. And again, it's a long story and I don't want to bore the team members, but like I said, we had some orphan residents, I think in 7 of the attached units that were on a pump and haul and weren't getting street maintenance. And there was a whole lot of things that came about that caused us to basically go in the direction of detached single family dwellings on individual lots.
Okay. Then make them all Cs.
Liz?
I want to assure the gentleman from the college that we are not trying to keep in any way my proposal from that piece of property being sold. I think we need to take a closer look as to what is around that piece of property. And the circumstances when this developer came in and wanted to build 116 apartments in 8 buildings, 3+ stories high. So I think whom I've talked with in and around this community, including Westridge Oaks and others, that a like home, such as a villa, would be advantageous to this area, this designation of cultural institutional. How that will happen, I don't know, unless a builder comes in. I know we don't have a lot of villas or high-end villas here. Not that the Meadows is high-end, but could suffice, because I know there are people that leave Wildwood, having been here for decades, and they don't seem to find that type of home. And this is an excellent location for something like continued building of villas.
Yes.
Thank you.
I would just like to assure Mr. Zink and Dr. Lepardis, as a alumnus of your fine institution, that the role of this committee was on a 10-year basis evaluate whether the existing process remained valid. One of the things that was demonstrated to us recently was that there was a great deal of public input and concern about the proposed development. As a result of that, I think what we've done is taken a step back and realized any future proposals where they may remain valid and perfectly acceptable would require the input of the community and perhaps a more in-depth process. So that's all that we're trying to do, is make sure that what remains on the books as the process for any development in the future is the one that's most applicable to the community at large.
Any other comments or questions from team members? Any comments or questions or from the community college representatives?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening and answer your questions. And certainly the last gentleman, we always appreciate seeing our alumni being successful in the community. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I just want to, we just want to be good partners with the city of Wildwood, continue this strong partnership and continue to have discussions. So thank you so much for including us in this evening's meeting.
Very welcome.
Thank you. So we're back to the Broyles Loyal motion. Are there any other comments about that motion? Or Not, are you ready to vote? I'm assuming the answer to that is yes. So we will take a roll call vote. Kathy, before we do that, Liz, would you repeat the motion?
Okay. Considering this is, I'm not talking about the motion, but considering what Mr. Vunich has said about the single family detached, the cultural institutional not being marked there. Of course, I would want to include that in the proposal. So my proposal is that the fee for permitted by right be eliminated under housing for multifamily residential and apartments, that section, and that become a C, conditional use permit.
And I think we're going to include the detached single family as well, just for purposes of consistency, yes.
That would be
The mo-
fine. Thank you.
The motion as I have it is to change all residential uses in the cultural institutional to be conditional, not permitted. Okay. Member Roughton?
Yes.
Member Lux?
Yes.
Member Edwards?
Yes.
Member Weiss?
Yes.
Member Risdall?
Yes.
Member Marion?
Yes.
Member Broyles?
Yes.
Member Hood?
Yes.
Chair Loyal?
Yes.
Member Sedlak?
Yes.
Member Cohn?
Yes.
Member Helfrey?
Yes.
Member Lee? Is he still on? No, okay. Member Hoffman
No.
and Member McCutcheon.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion passes. Liz, do you have any other items or other aspects of this item to
I do not. Thank you, sir.
stop? Then we will move on to item 7 on the agenda, the final property considerations. And back to you, Joe.
Again, thank you, Dr. Jones and Chief Loyal. Members of the team, the description on the agenda seems a little general in nature, but my apologies. Really, there is only one remaining property that we need to discuss before we close what I would consider the regulating plan discussion. And like the other, this has been discussed at length relative to our process. It is Mr. Madlinger's property that is off of Woods Avenue, just south of Manchester Road. Adjoining uses is the Grover Crossing subdivision, Main Street Plaza, which is a commercial activity, and some other residential uses. The team spent a great deal of time investigating this particular location. It was part of our tour in July of 2019. Mr. Madlinger has spoken to the team on at least 2 occasions, if not 3. And ultimately, the team made a recommendation to include, as part of the town center boundary, certain properties owned by Mr. Madlinger and another gentleman into the new district we created, Neighborhood Edge Transition. Mr. Madlinger spoke to us most recently saying that he has, I think, contacted 17 different residential developers through his broker or brokers, and none of them are interested because of the low density nature of the Neighborhood Edge Transition, which is basically 2 units for every 3 acres of ground. At our most recent meeting where Mr. Madlinger spoke, he made a plea for Neighborhood Edge. And tonight, that is the nature of the discussion. Do we, as a team, recommend Neighborhood Edge Transition, or do we consider Neighborhood Edge on all or a portion of the property? Mr. Madlinger is in attendance again, and as part of this discussion, Ms. Arnett, Mr. Newberry, and I have provided the background we used during the initial discussion on this, which ended in the Neighborhood Edge Transition designation. As always, I thank you for your attention, and Kathy, Travis and I are available for any questions or comments. And again, Mr. Madlinger is on the screen.
So before turning to either Joe or Mr. Madlinger, it would be cleanest if somebody made a motion, whether they support it or not, to put the change on the agenda. Because unless there's a motion to do the change and with a second, it doesn't make sense to have a further discussion of it. So, or that makes less sense. So would somebody, I encourage somebody to move to make the change in the designation and somebody else to second it. Scott?
I propose to change it.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion. So, Mr. Madlinger, why don't we turn to you first?
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Jones. Thank you, Chief. I've been working diligently to try and sell the property for a long time. And I'm continuing to run into walls with the designations for neighborhood edge transition. And I know we spoke last time in depth about how, you know, the feeling was that it was the developers just want to get everything and maximize what they want out of it. But honestly, I'm the landholder. I don't want to tell the developer what exactly to do. That's Joe's position. I'm looking to try and be able to have land that's sellable. And at this point, I can't sell the property. I actually lowered the price again today with my broker because I just can't get anybody interested. Even with the opportunity of other landowners around me that are open to it, and some that have access to Manchester, which is much higher density, that are kind of waiting on me. I can't get any builders to the table because, you know, they feel that it's difficult to get things going in Wildwood, and that it's even more difficult if they can't utilize the groundscape as it is, which is, there's not a large area to scape here, you know, to build homes. And I think it was 20 houses would have been completely, would have probably completed it. I'm just looking to be able to have the ability to sell, because at this point I can't. And I'm fighting every day, but unfortunately, it's not a quarter of an acre to support nor pay taxes on. It's an exorbitant amount of money to pay taxes on. It's crushing me and my family. So I'm trying to put the best, most reasonable opportunity available to somebody that could do something with all this land. And there's no reason that there's a huge swath of this property. We're talking about actually a small area that would be developed. And there's a huge swath that couldn't be, that would still be green space, and a large area green space. But all developers have said, we need to be able to maximize density in a smaller area because we can't use the rest of it. And, you know, I can pick up a stone and I can throw to a rock to 35, 40 homes on 4 acres. But here I am kind of relegated on this front portion. So that's my request is to hopefully be looked at as neighborhood edge. Yes.
I have 2 hands. First, I'll recognize Dan and then Vince.
Joe, I had a one-on-one with you, I think a discussion while we were walking the property. Are you still convinced that there would be no access to this new development off of Woods Road, and that Woods Road could be protected with some type of buffer?
Woods Road is a city street. And so as a city street, the city council and our Department of Public Works practice access management. And so there is an existing curb cut, which would not accommodate much greater than current. And so my response to your question would be is we can practice access management and ensure that access to the site is from the safest locations.
Yeah, I thought the just some early discussion you and I had was that the entrance and egress would be from the side that's already substantially developed. Is that still true, or would we break into Woods Road?
Well, we being the city, did require a stub street as part of Grover Crossing. My track record of late of extending stub streets from existing development to new development has been very poor. So with that, I would say that the department will recommend the use of the stub street. How that works out, I don't know. But I would also just advise that Woods Road, given the topography, its width, just doesn't lend itself well to greater utilization.
And that's kind of my point. I guess the other question I had was, we already went from a rural designation to a neighborhood edge. So when we basically gave up some density, increased the density, what's the thought process on what would happen as far as on neighborhood edge? How many homes were we talking about for that piece of land versus the new designation? How many homes would we be talking about?
Well, as a refresher, Mr. Manlinger and his neighbor own about 40 plus acres total. The area that is shown as alternative A1 is about 22 acres. I think Kathy calculated that today, so if I'm wrong, correct me, Ms. Arnett. So under the, let's say,
No, that's not correct.
neighbor, pardon? I'm
Mr.
sorry,
Madden?
sir.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
I said that's correct, about 22 acres.
Thank you. Under the neighborhood edge transition, there's two scenarios that could potentially play out. One is the 22 acres would be multiplied by 2 and divided by 3, and we end up with about 14 home sites. And those home sites all have to be on an acre minimum lot. The other scenario would be is Mr. Manlinger uses a planned residential development overlay district, incorporates the 20 acres to the south, retaining it as common ground, but transfers the density from there up to the 22 acres that has much better topography, better access to utilities, etc. So in total, that could be a 20 plus lot plan, so to speak. The neighborhood edge, generally what we found in other projects in town center with the same designation, neighborhood edge district, we've been in the range of about 3 to 4 lots per acre. So just using 20, let's just round down to 20 acres. That could mean anywhere from 60 lots on up. I would guess that's probably high because we do deduct things like right of way, etc. But so we may go from, let's say we may double the number of lots by the change.
Vince, you're next.
When you say by the change, Joe, is that the change from neighborhood edge transition to neighborhood edge, or from, what is it now, urban or non-urban?
Yes, it would be from neighborhood edge transition to neighborhood edge.
Right. And I guess what I'm seeing is realistically, we changed it to neighborhood edge transition in an effort to address Mr. Madlinger's concerns. We have the good fortune of having 4 members of the Planning and Zoning Commission on our team. And I think with the sentiments of the mayor in his last campaign about not increasing the dense development within town center or even adjacent to town center, I would just hate to change something that we knew didn't have a chance of moving past this team, quite frankly. I think we saw that with the Ackerley property, and realistically, I think that we were productive and accommodating to go to the neighborhood edge transition, but to change to neighborhood edge, I just don't think it has any chance of getting past this committee. Even if we approve it, going further would be a stretch from what I have seen the sentiments of the Planning and Zoning Council are at this point.
I agree with that.
Deborah and then Liz.
Yeah, I totally agree with Vince's comments. And I've said this multiple times, but residents have been adamant they do not want high density even in town center. They've wanted less density. Every time we've done a high density development, there's been a lot of negative comments by residents. There's also been a lot of removal of plantings and trees, even though Mr. Vunich's department has tried to protect some of those. Some of them just kind of disappeared on us anyway. So I really can't support that. We've accommodated 2 or 3 of his requests, and now we're back again. And I'm sure there is somebody out there, whether it's a different broker or a different developer, that would be willing to purchase the property and, you know, go ahead and build houses on it. So I'm sorry, but I can't support the request.
Liz?
I think that, I don't remember which month it was, but we took, this committee took a walking tour of that property. And if any of you have sheltered your dogs at his business, you know that it's surrounded by woods on the west and the south side, and partly on the east side. So other than traffic coming out of Woods Road or onto Woods Road at the very top of Woods Road, I don't know. I think this gentleman, his parents bought this property, and there's another owner there as well. There's 2 owners. Mr. Madlinger owns the greater amount of land there. And it's my understanding that he wants to live at the rear of that property as well. And just the location, it's not visual. It's from Manchester Road. It is not. And I am very concerned about traffic as well. But I've driven up to that business many, many times. And I would have to be in favor of him being able to secure neighborhood edge instead of neighborhood transition in that location. Thank you.
Other comments, Vince?
I guess I would ask either Ed or Michael or Vicky, members of the P&Z, their at least peripheral thoughts on this proposed or requested change.
Any of those 3 wish to? Michael?
Yeah, so I would agree with Deborah on this. I think it should be the way we had it. Neighborhood edge is going to have a better chance of success. I don't think the other application will work at all, honestly. I don't think there'll be any support at all through council or Planning and Zoning Commission.
I think what you mean, Michael, is neighborhood edge transition, not neighborhood edge. Is that correct?
Yeah, neighborhood edge transition, I think, is the way to go.
Ed or Vicky, you have any thoughts?
Ed?
Yeah.
Vic? Ed?
I'm in favor of neighborhood edge. I would vote for that to go forward.
Vicky?
As far as this property goes, when we walked it, one of my biggest concerns was the protection of the landscape along the ridge, and we talked extensively about it. I don't want to be prohibitive to anybody, but I think I would support the neighborhood edge transition. I would, as an aside, just mention a concern that I have. I realize that we hear from people that we don't want high density housing in Wildwood, especially in town center. But I will tell you, I also hear many people say that we have no housing for beginners, like apartments. And the reason I bring that up now is just because it kind of ties into this, as well as the last property that we were just talking about. I just think that we need to be mindful that, you know, we need to have a place for people to, when they graduate college or graduate whatever and want to start out, we invite them to start out here in Wildwood. And I don't know that there are many places like that for them. But having said that, as far as this property goes, I think that neighborhood edge transition is probably the way to go with this. Thank you.
Other comments, Ray?
So if I understand correctly, we've considered this twice before. We've come to some sort of a decision, calling it neighborhood edge transition. We've walked the property. What has changed since the last time we made a decision on this? I guess that's the question I have. And I understand that the owner is having a hard time selling this, and I empathize with that. I understand that the price has been reduced yet again today. But what has changed since the last time we went through this decision-making process that would cause us to change our minds? That's my question.
Well,
Other comments?
Dr. Edwards?
I
think Mr. Madlinger could probably answer that better than anyone if Dr. Jones.
Okay. Mr. Magler, do you care to comment?
Yeah, actually, I understood our last meeting and kind of walked away saying, okay, that's where we are. But it was Kathy came to my attention, brought it to my attention that there was members that had questions and wanted to revisit this once more. And so I came to be respectful of the committee, because if there was a question that I could help or clarify, on the position, that was why I came in today. I wasn't trying to rehash. I was asked in, and I was understood that there were some questions. So I said, sure, I'll be happy to speak again. I feel like I've worked with you guys quite a bit on this, and I do respect your decision. I'm just looking to more than anything, what really came to light to me was the building limitations and restrictions for neighborhood edge transition, regardless of density. It's not necessarily saying you can build 40 or 60 homes or 20 homes. Every layout that I've talked to and had people and taken the time to build up really came in at about 20 something homes. It was the offsets. The neighborhood edge transition really forces houses to be pushed back, and now you're pushing them closer to the edge of the hill. Now you're talking about retaining walls, and that's what the developers have come to me and said, if we had neighborhood edge, we could actually compress it and do some more, save more of the green space. So it was really on the building layout in neighborhood edge transition, not necessarily the density of homes. That's what my understanding was as a layman who just happens to have a bunch of property back here that is trying to move on.
I can clarify to Dr. Jones.
Yeah, Kathy?
On the request, Mr. Madlinger was invited this evening at the team's request from last month. There was some confusion during the discussion last month on edge versus edge transition. And so the conclusion of the team's discussion in early August was to ask again, Mr. Madlinger, just for clarification. So that's what we did, and that's why he's back. So I apologize if there's, he didn't come back to the well. I reached out to him at what I thought you all had asked me to do. So, thank you.
Deborah? The mute button, Deborah?
What?
Okay.
Oh, yeah, my mic is on. Joe, he could get a PRD on this property, correct?
Yes, the PRD could be applied on any residential property in town center.
And then it would allow for more houses, correct?
Not an increase in density, but more flexibility with the neighborhood design standards, such as setbacks, lot width, lot depth, etc.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes? Your mic, Vince.
You know, it seems as though there's not an indication that there's a motion of changes to neighborhood edge. I guess I would ask, and I previously have asked this of Mr. Madlinger, Is it your preference that we would at least leave it at neighborhood edge transition versus going back to the original zoning classification?
Mr. Madliger?
Yes. Yes, that's how I answered last time as well.
Okay, thank you.
Dan?
I propose a motion that we leave it as discussed.
The motion's already on the table, so that would just mean that you would vote no on the motion.
Okay.
See no more hands.
What is the motion, Dr. Jones? I'm sorry, I don't know what the motion is on the table.
Kathy, the motion on the table is to change the designation from neighborhood edge transition to neighborhood edge.
Okay. Did that receive a second?
Yes, it did.
Yes, sir.
From you, actually, I thought. No, you were the maker of the motion.
No, it was Mr. Risdall that made the motion and
I
Mr.
made the
Cohn
motion.
seconded it.
Oh, Cohen, okay. Thank you. Thank you, Kathy. Seeing no more hands, let's then proceed to a vote on the motion. Kathy, would you repeat the motion one more time before doing the roll call on the vote?
Yes, sir. I have the motion is to modify the land use category for the what is known as alternative A1 from neighborhood edge transition to neighborhood edge district. And Member Broyles? A no is no change, just to clarify.
Yes. May I make a remark here in regard to Ms. McCutcheon's information about a PRD? Or am I too late?
I think the remark would be better made after the roll call. The roll calls are supposed to be only the vote as opposed to expressing the opinions which you have already decided to move to a vote.
Member Broyles?
So the rules are that I can't make a comment about the PRD. It's too late.
No,
Is
you
that
can make
correct?
the comment after the roll call vote.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Member Broyles, how do you vote?
Oh, you calling me?
Yes.
I'm going to vote yes.
Member Marion?
No.
Member Risdall?
Yes.
Member Weiss?
No.
Member Edwards?
No.
Member Lux?
Yes.
Member Roughton?
No.
Member Hood?
No.
Chair Loyal?
No.
Member Sedlak?
Yes.
Member Cohn?
Yes.
Member Helfrey?
No.
Member Lee?
No.
Member Hoffman?
Yes.
Member McCutcheon?
No.
Motion
Kathy,
fails.
you be score too?
Yes, I have six yes and 10 opposed.
Motion is defeated. Liz, would you like to make your comment, please?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to ask this question to Mr. Vunich. Is it possible at neighborhood edge transition, a PRD can still be used or requested?
Yes, ma'am. I think most projects in town center either anticipate a planned district like the C8 planned commercial district or a planned residential development overlay district, a PRD. We really haven't had many projects, I think only a couple that have moved forward without some type of overlay or special district.
So my second question to you, Mr. Vunich, is it possible that with a PRD that he could find some assistance with selling this property to a developer with a PRD?
I think the PRD would vastly improve the chances of this project developing in a way that the team would be satisfied with, and hopefully Mr. Manliger as well. Today, as mentioned, Kathy came up with the idea is that if we have 20 acres to the south, that could be included in the PRD, still as in the non-urban residential area. But what that would mean is those 6 lots that could never be developed on that slope could move up into this 22-acre area. And then potentially we could increase the density again to 20 to 22 lots. And then ultimately with the PRD, address some of Mr. Manlinger's concerns about the lot sizes, lot dimensions, and setbacks.
Okay, and I would think, not being in the business that you are, Joe, as the planner, that maybe you could work with Mr. Madlinger to clarify that for him, so he could see probably a possibility of making his ground and the other owner more marketable.
I'd be glad to work with Mr. Manlinger or any of the development interests that might review this property for future use. I'm always available, as well as Kathy and Travis.
And one last question. Who decides? Do we vote again, or does this go to the council, that a PRD? It goes to the council?
It starts in Planning and Zoning Commission and then heads to City Council, where all things are voted upon.
Okay, thank you so much for that information.
You're welcome.
Nor is there any other action or comments that needed to be solicited on this item? If not, let's move to item 8 on the agenda. Overview of recommended changes.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Madlinger. Joe?
Thank you, Dr. Jones. Dr. Jones and members of the team, the Department of Planning is preparing for our next step in the process, which is public input. And despite all of my tendencies to create voluminous documents of information for people to read, tonight I'm offering you just a few pages that kind of summarize almost 2 years of activity. So I hope it's satisfactory. Basically, what Kathy, Travis, and I attempted to do is first, as part of this document, to kind of set the tone of what we've been doing. When we started, when the document was last updated, 2010, and the components of the document that were reviewed by this team. As you know, we started with the 5 major components and spent the lion's share of our time reviewing each and every one of them. The second part is to kind of give some recognition to a group, this team, that has been working very hard for 2 years and now through a COVID-19 pandemic. I think it's also important that residents and others know that this wasn't something done behind closed doors with staff only or just a few elected officials, but more importantly, a broad spectrum of representatives from the community, anchored as always by our residents from the individual wards. Thereafter, the department then kind of goes into just a general statement that how detailed this analysis was. At some point, I think we looked at every word and every sentence on some of the issues just to make sure we knew what we were doing and not adding any connotations that weren't supported. And then finally, just the hierarchy of the reviews, starting with the street network map and ending with the architectural guidelines. The document itself, I think, is most important with regards to your decisions. And we provide 2 columns, order of decisions, and then the decision itself. And I guess the 3rd column being the major component associated with it. Inclusive with that is the 2 projects that were submitted to you via the Planning and Zoning Commission. Thereafter, I do somewhat of a summary statement. And then finally, what I believe the Town Center Update team achieved in terms of their outcomes. And those outcomes were prioritizing roads, adding certain areas to the town center boundary to create better transitions. The new land use district as part of those transitions, the new land use designations and kind of from that perspective in the general vicinity of the downtown district. And at the end of the day, this may be your most important move. You respected the downtown district and retained much of it in its current size and location, but you also recognized that the downtown district needed additional housing to basically support the businesses and make them vibrant and bring more activity to the area that is downtown district. Then we went on and modernized our land use activities and the terms associated with it. And finally, we protected key neighborhood design standards and architectural guidelines that make our town center new urbanism. So from that perspective, it was a successful process. This would, for all intents and purposes, be the document we would provide as part of our public input processes. And hopefully from the perspective of the department, is long enough to give people a good summary, but not too long that they just set it aside and don't pay attention. So that is what is being offered to you tonight for consideration. If you find it acceptable, then we'll move forward as the guiding document during our public input process. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Comments on the document? Ray?
Yeah, I would just like to say that I think the document itself in the main is wonderfully done, really very descriptive. It gets right to the heart of what we accomplished. And I also think that the document is reflective of the staff support that we've received on this team, which has also been terrific. So I think you've done very good work on this, Joe and Kathy and the rest of the team. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Liz, and then Deborah.
Liz going first.
Liz is first, yes. After she opens up her mic.
That would be great. I would like to applaud the team and the planning department. It has been really an easy way, and you have paved that way, the officials at Wildwood. And thank you so much for the patience and the explanations and the time that you've spent on this. I think Wildwood is in a greater place because of our team and because of our officials and the planning department. Thank you.
Deborah, you are next.
Yeah, I concur with Ms. Broyles and Mr. Edwards' comments. I do have one question. Number 18, should that read neighborhood edge or should that read neighborhood edge transition?
Joe?
Seems to be contagious tonight.
Yeah.
That mute button. I believe, remember, the neighborhood edge district is not the neighborhood transition nor the neighborhood general. And I think there was a feeling that that particular neighborhood edge district should retain only single family detached on individual lots. Saying that, we can track back and verify both on the table that's provided as part of the packet, and we'll check the minutes. But I think in context, it's correct, Ms. McCutcheon.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments about any? Let the document surface. Then item 9, Joe, upcoming meeting schedule for the
Dr.
public.
Jones, if I may, I would respectfully request a motion second, and it could be a voice vote as far as I'm concerned, just endorsing the use of this document for our public input process.
Vince, are you willing to make such a
I
motion?
would make that motion. I would request it to be a roll call vote, please.
Is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Deborah McCutcheon. We're ready to vote. Kathy, or any comments on the motion? Hearing none. Kathy, will you call the roll?
Yes, sir. Member Hood,
Yes.
Member Roughton,
Yes.
Member Lux,
Yes.
Member Edwards,
Yes.
Member Weiss,
Yes.
Member Risdall,
Yes.
Member Marion,
Yes.
Member Broyles,
Yes.
Member McCutcheon,
Yes.
Member Hoffman,
Yes.
Member Lee,
Yes.
Member Helfrey,
Yes.
Member Cohn,
Yes.
Member Sedlak,
Yes.
Chair Loyal.
Yes.
Motion passes
Unanimous. Thank you
unanimous.
very much.
Okay. Number 9 on the agenda, Joe.
Well, thank you again, Dr. Jones. Dr. Jones, a member of the team, we've now completed our task in terms of the document. And now comes probably one of the more important components as well, getting feedback from our residents, those that own property or live in town center, as well as elsewhere across the community. As you know, many of you represent people, residents that are not from town center per se. Obviously, our normal processes would have been to hold a number of public input sessions, invite people to centralized locations such as schools or churches, and then go through a process with them to basically draw out their comments, their feelings and opinions. COVID-19, for the most part, does not allow us to do that. So tonight, Kathy Travis and I want to explore with you the option of doing a virtual public input session or sessions over the course of the next 6 to 8 weeks. Now, many of you may feel like, well, virtually, what does that mean? Recently, the department, being guided by the Planning and Parks Committee of City Council, who Ms. McCutcheon chairs, we're able to do a virtual session on the Village Green, what people would like, what people would not like, passive, active, a long list of options and opportunities. Much to our surprise, and this was done in April 2020, we received over 400 responses to that process. That by far exceeded anything we've ever done in person. And to even make that number more impressive, there was a video at the start to kind of explain the process, and the survey itself took almost 15 minutes. And then there was additional time, there was additional information at the end of the survey if people wanted to basically provide much more detailed information. So pretty impressive. I would like to start with something like that. And the other advantage to it too is not only do we identify the people in town center, property owners, residents, businesses, etc., but we also can obviously reach out to all of Wildwood. I'm not saying that may be the only approach. Maybe we're looking at actually doing live Zoom meetings or public input where we can engage with people. And we can probably do more of them because we don't necessarily have to reserve facilities and compete with other activities or just their closure, which means right now Rockwood School District doesn't allow outsiders in their buildings even after school hours. So what we would like to do is put together a program, forward it out to you, but I think the initial step would be doing a virtual public input session on the town center plan. And I think the components again would be an introductory video or commentary, then the plan itself and the changes and opportunities to provide feedback. And then at the conclusion, here are some other items. What do you think? And so that's kind of the proposal tonight to get things rolling on our public input. The goal is to have public input concluded before the holidays and then have the team back together for either 1 or 2 meetings in the new year, probably January and maybe early February, to conclude, to review the public input, make any changes to your recommendations, and then adopt the final report that the team would like to proceed forward with to the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Reactions from team members?
I would just say, it sounds like a great plan. Thank you for taking the lead on this part of the process, Joe, as all of them.
Actually, it was more Kathy and Travis than I.
Well,
Any
Thank
other
you.
comments?
So if there is no objection, what we'll do is we'll get the format squared away, the documentation, the questions, and then we'll get that to you. I'm thinking that our next meeting isn't till December 8th. I may beg upon you just to do a quick kind of Zoom meeting when we get the format together and the document, the content, just to get your buy-in before we proceed forward. But that'll be a priority, and we'll try to do that over the next couple of weeks.
I guess, Joe, would you anticipate the virtual public hearings being before December 8th?
I'd like to have them, I'd like to have two, if not all, completed.
Okay, thank you. I know Vicky had a comment also.
Vicky?
Thank you. I was just curious, Mr. Vintage, how you'll notify the public at large of these virtual things.
Every once in a while, the department pleads to city council, and they've always been receptive that they let us do a citywide mailing. And I think this is one of those times when we need to do it. We did it for our master plan update, a critical document, obviously, to the success of Wildwood. I believe we did it for the Parks Action Plan, didn't we, Kathy? Another document that we use each and every day. So that would be my recommendation, is this probably deserves a citywide mailing to just give everybody the opportunity.
Other questions or comments? Deborah?
Yeah, Joe, if my memory serves, at one point, we gave residents the option of a paper survey. So could we include that as well?
Always. For some of you, you know, we have an internet issue out in some of the rural areas of Wildwood. So virtual meetings and Zoom may not be the best option. Although the nice thing about this is, if you're at work, you have bad, first of all, you have bad internet at home, but you're at work and your internet's good, you eat your sandwich and you fill out the survey and you can do it there. So, and I said lunchtime, not during working hours. So, but yes, we'll have available that people can come by and fill out a survey here. I think we're moving toward a less restrictive use of City Hall here in the near future. So that's an option we'll certainly do for the team.
Thank you.
Other comments or questions about the process?
Thank you all.
We'll move on to item 10 on the agenda, final public comments. Are there any? Any input from team members?
We do have one person still in our attendee. It's Councilmember Garitano. So if he would like to speak, I would ask that he would raise his hand.
Council member, would you like to comment?
Thank you, Joe.
I think he's taking a pass. Thank you.
All right. Item 11, other items of interest. Joe?
Dr. Jones, I just have one, and it's a follow-up to what we just concluded.
Sure.
Kathy, Travis, and I'll start working on the public input format as soon as we can. Once we have it, we'll reach out to you to see if we can squeeze in just a short Zoom meeting so you can see the content, what the content portrays, and then add any comments, and then we can get started. So if that's okay, just kind of be prepared. We won't use a lot of your time. I know we've extended beyond what some of you thought, and we are very, very appreciative of your efforts. Thank you.
Dan?
Give us a real quick update on two projects we addressed. One was Latitude North and the other one was Ackerley Place. Where do both those projects stand?
Latitude North 38 was withdrawn, and so there's nothing going on right at the moment relative to those two properties. The Ackerley Place, it will be at the Planning and Zoning Commission on Monday night, October 5th. The Planning and Zoning Commission has given a tentative recommendation to a 132 lot plan.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Other questions or comments? Vince, did
I would just say my closing remarks. I would just say to Joe, Kathy, Travis, and also please convey to Terry our deep appreciation for the assistance and guidance that you and your staff have provided to us during this process is greatly appreciated. I know of everyone. Dr. Jones, your leadership in conducting civil meetings is greatly appreciated. I think we all have an appreciation of how government can operate. We've seen a lot of examples lately about the worst in government. And I think our grassroots efforts over the last 2 years have demonstrated that people of different lifestyles and different concerns can come together for the, the betterment of the whole. And I thank each and every one of you for this long-term commitment you've made to this process, and we're all going to benefit as a result. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Vince. Certainly as an experienced moderator and facilitator, I felt very deeply for Chris Wallace last evening. So there's a motion to adjourn.
Aye.
Oh, Deborah, seconded by Vince. All in favor?
Aye.
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 We're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Aye.
Thank you all again for